And welcome to another episode of Tech and Test with me, Peter Johnson. Today on the show, we have Tatyana, who's a quality leader, quality engineer, community builder, all those things. People, do you want to introduce yourself, Tatyana, to the Tech and Test audience? You do a lot of things. You even run QA conferences. You've worked in healthcare. I haven't got the list in front of me, but introduce
Yes,
yourself.
Peter. I thank you for having me on the show. First of all, I really appreciate the time. And yes, I spent 20 plus years in quality working in big tech, healthcare, and entertainment companies. I've been leading quality engineering teams in the past 10 years. 10 plus years. And recently, in the last couple of years, I started building a community in Seattle and now a global community of quality professionals and a conference, Innovate QA conference that we run in Seattle. And now we're expanding to San Francisco. But we are a community of global community of quality professionals or quality leaders, engineering leaders who care about quality. And so right now I'm running that full time. And that's my most job right now.
Awesome. So what kind of shifts have you seen actually, talking about QA and quality? You've been in the industry for some time. What's one big thing that you've noticed, like maybe in your community, that a big change that's like been constant, I guess?
Change in tech is constant, right? Tech
Right.
never stays in one place. It's constantly moving. So in 20 plus years that I've been in this industry, we started with the waterfall models where developers develop code and then we test it after the fact, right? There was a lot of manual testing involved because the testing discipline was still in its infancy. So then automation came in. So we started focusing on automating repeatable steps. And then Agile came in. So soon
Right.
after I started at Microsoft, I think 2004 is when Microsoft started adopting Agile. And we realized, hey, if we have to release every 2 weeks, now how do we, fit our regression testing into that 2 weeks?
Mm,
And how do
mm.
we do this so we can actually release every 2 weeks, right? And so then that was a shift that uh, forced us to become even more efficient at test automation, first of all. And second of all, it made a shift left where we had to start testing before the code is ready. We had to look at the specifications, make sure that that lines up with the customer experience. We had to provide feedback for the code, and we had to write the test automation before the developers are done coding, right? And so to make sure that in agile world we can release. So that was a big shift, and with a
Mm.
lot of browsers introduced, and then with the mobile apps introduced, then the matrix expanded, and then we
Right.
had to automate even more, right? And the latest shift came, of course, with AI. So now that the application development speeds up, now we have to figure out, okay, how do we speed up? How do we catch up with all of that? So I would say the testing discipline always had to adjust to
Mm.
the how the tech methodologies were changing, and we're constantly in this adaptation kind of adaptive mode, and now we're adapting to the AI wave.
Yeah, no, fair point. I guess, talking about really it's about scaling testing and making sure we can always keep up with the demands of development, that we're not the bottleneck, right? So,
Yep.
what kind of things have you noticed that have worked well where you've tried to scale teams, or maybe where scaling of like testing or processes or tools has not worked? What do people tend to make mistakes with when we start scaling testing?
So one mistake I see organization make is when they scale the development team, they
Mm,
decide that hiring more testers is the way to go. So the test
right.
manager gets into the company and they say, "Oh, I'm going to grow my QA team, and that's
Yeah.
how I'm going to grow myself." Right? And this is not exactly the right way to scale the QA quality,
Mm,
because with a bigger QA team, you get different challenges. Now you have to standardize the processes again across the big QA team. Now you
mm.
have to find time in the development cycle for all of these people to do their QA work. And then you realize, hey, I'm going slower than, I can't release as fast because all of these people are doing work. So adding people to the QA team is not exactly how you scale organizations. What I've seen work much better is building quality mindset in the organization where
Mm.
quality is everyone's responsibility, and QA team is not responsible for all types of testing. If we get code from developers that doesn't work, that basic functionality doesn't work, that
Yeah.
API doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and we have to spend time testing it, filing bugs, go back and forth, validating these bugs, that's all the time that we're losing.
Yeah.
So the way big tech goes about this and the way big tech scales this kind of processes is we shift most of the functional testing is onto developers. And now the quality teams, it's a lean quality team, but they
Hmm.
focus on the end to end. They focus on the logic that not every developer knows or understands, because developers are focusing on their own service or their own API, and they don't necessarily know how it all connects in a complex architecture, in a complex system, how it all connects to other components. So this is where the QA team comes in. They understand the overall customer scenarios, business logic, how all of these systems work together, and they validate the end-to-end scenarios rather than doing a basic functional testing.
Mm. Yeah, I think the key thing you've said there is that ownership is everyone's responsibility, right? It's not one QA org or one QA team that is responsible for quality. It's distributed. Everyone. So the way I kind of think of it is, who's going to be writing the code? Are they going to be basically called out at nighttime when there's an incident? If you're responsible for maintaining that code, you should also be responsible for writing tests for it.
Yeah, yeah. And you have to make sure that it works before you declare code complete, right?
Right.
It's kind of weird to, I'm going to write the code, but I don't know if it works.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I'm still responsible for the incident troubleshooting. So they have to at least make sure that what they developed works. And then, we'll have other people to validate the integrations.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, certainly. At Google, they have this sort of model where like each developer it has to write their own tests, right? You can't ship code if there's no tests written there. And test engineers are definitely like involved in making sure the tooling's there, the dashboards are there, the data's there. But it's definitely on the developer to contribute to the testing piece.
Yeah,
So,
I really like the Google model, right? So they are test tools teams are focusing on enabling developers
mm,
to create the right coverage, and this is how you scale quality,
right.
basically, because you cannot go back to, like in 2000 when I joined Microsoft, we had two developers, one tester. So
Mm,
for each two developers, we had a tester. And
wow.
if you start growing this development team, you cannot scale the organization that way, right? And so this is why we have to push this left. We should have to push this some of the functional quality onto developers,
Mm,
and then focus on the tools, because tools development, it's hard work. So
right.
if you
Yeah.
put this on testers, the tools development, and then they have to do functional, and then integration, and then end to end, and then performance, then how
Yeah.
big of a QA team do you need to have, right?
Right. Yeah. Then you're hiring software engineers just to do all of these things, right? The team size
Exactly.
just explodes, and then, like you said, you can't scale. Um,
Exactly.
so that's really interesting. When you go to these conferences, which you're creating and contributing to, what are some of the topics that are coming up at the moment in terms of relevancy for testing?
Yes, I'll tell you a short story for how I created Innovate QA.
Right.
Okay, so I worked in big tech, and I've been scaling quality in big tech for, uh, you know, 10 plus, I don't know, 15 plus years.
Hmm.
And then I worked at the companies which are, smaller non-tech companies, healthcare or entertainment like Disney and Pokemon. And I realized that they don't quite understand the shift left. When I talked about, hey, developers are going to be writing functional tests, they got scared that we're going to lose our jobs as testers,
Right.
because what are we going to do? And so they didn't understand this shift as like there's so much more as a tester that you could focus on
Hmm.
end-to-end performance, optimizing customer experience. and whatnot. And so instead of going company to company explaining the shift left and scaling quality, I decided I'm going to organize a conference where I'm going to bring the speakers from the big tech and fun companies, and they're going to be educating everyone on how to scale quality. And so
Nice.
most of the speakers that I invite and we have at Innovate QA conference, they talk about how do you build quality mindset? How do
Mm,
you build the tools? How do you set up the processes to scale quality in your organization? They're not going to tell you how to automate these tests. Like we don't talk about basic, testing
yeah.
skills. We talk about how do we lead quality teams? Because if you're a tester who only focuses on functional testing, you're already behind, in the industry. You have to be a quality champion that helps the teams to establish the quality mindset. And Otherwise, you might lose your job, tomorrow. And we already see so many layoffs. So the
Yeah.
quality or testers professionals who are going to survive and who's going to stay is the one who focus on enabling developers to do testing, building the
Yeah.
quality mindset, and figuring out how to be a multiplier, not
Right.
just do the work, but be a
Yeah.
multiplier of quality processes in the organization.
Yes. Yeah. 100% on that one. Because we go back to the same problem, right? Who's writing all the tests? And whenever I'm sort of thinking about a test framework or building tests, I'm always thinking about handing this over to a developer to then can take over, right? Whether it's like a Claude skill that you throw in there or something else that some base framework that you've started, and then there's another problem you can focus on, right? Maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's contract testing, or maybe it's looking at dashboards, getting some more data for somewhere else, or looking at performance. Like you said, there's always more things we can be doing instead of just continuing to write tests in one area, right?
Yes,
Once
yes.
that framework is there, the developers should be able to just jump in and write those tests and take ownership. So
Exactly, exactly. Right on point.
interesting. Okay. And something that's, really relevant, and I've mentioned it already now with Claude Code and Claude Skills, is AI, right? So AI is coming into the testing world. It's been here for a couple of years, maybe 3 years. What's been your experience with like using AI tooling in testing? Like, how advanced is this? Because I've seen all kinds of, work with some developers in some orgs where they don't really trust the AI tools. They still want to write code by hand. Then I've worked in teams where it's been very, very AI driven in terms of loads of AI generated code, right? And like you do end up with those issues of keeping up with the team because they're moving at absolute pace. So, what's been your experience with like using these AI tools and using AI generally within like software testing?
Yeah. So we're past the point, past the question if we should use AI for testing or development. We already
Right.
passed that point.
Yeah.
We have to use it. The question is, what are we using it for, and
Mm,
how useful it is in different areas? Because there's not just one way to apply AI. AI can be used, even in testing. We can start with test generation, test plan generation, based on the specifications. We can analyze the specifications and find the gaps. That's the work that testers are doing with shift left anyway.
yeah.
And we can save 10x time on just these two activities. We can analyze the test code and the dev code and find gaps with AI. Hey, which
Hmm.
and it's not just the code coverage, right? But the business logic gaps. We can use it for test maintenance, or even self-healing. Like even the self-healing mechanism for figuring out if this test is broken because of the product is broken, or because the one of the selectors got changed and it's actually not a product issue. Even for the log analysis, analyzing the logs and finding the patterns that can indicate the product issues or product bugs.
Mm,
For the root cause analysis, AI can help us identify why that bug uh, got introduced. So let's say you found the bug, which code change caused that bug to happen and how to quickly fix it. AI is helping us even with what is the fix for this bug, right? And so there are many companies and many people I talk to on my podcast, the Agentic Quality podcast. I talk to engineering leaders on how they adapt AI, what are they using AI for, and what are the barriers for AI adoption. And many engineering leaders are telling me that this is all in production. We're all using these capabilities of AI. So
Yeah.
there's no excuse. Like if Amazon is using AI for root
Yeah.
cause analysis or log analysis, there is no excuse not to use it. Okay. So like the big tech companies usually don't do stuff that are not useful, like because their speed is much faster than an average software company speed. So I'm hearing that this is all working. People are finding this useful. So there's no excuse anymore. Oh, I'm not going to use it because I don't trust it. Like it is being used. So
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. And if Amazon are using it, we can guarantee 100% they're using it because they know it's working. Right.
that's my thinking.
Well, it's they're really data driven org, right? They do loads of
Exactly.
experiments, so I can only think that they have the data to show it's working.
Exactly.
So just thinking about the role of SDET roles or testing roles or people working in this space at the moment, where do we think that's going to go? What does 5 years look like in terms of what changes are we expecting to see?
Yes. So I see that AI agents is going to do a lot of work, repeatable work that we do on a day-to-day basis. And so we will have to elevate ourselves as SDETs or testers to manage that work and come up with a strategy and also review that the agents are doing the right thing because we still need a person in the loop, a human in the loop. AI cannot be autonomous yet. It can be trusted to some extent with some tasks, but we still have to double check everything. So I think the tester will become more of it will almost be a manager that manages the work of a multiple agents, an agent who creates the test plan, an agent who analyzes the logs, and we already at the point where we can trust AI with making some of the decisions. So agentic AI can decide, hey, is this good enough to release or not? But we still need to be in the loop for the harder tasks, for a more advanced task. So I see the tester being more of a manager at this point who manages the tasks, make sure that everything is getting done appropriately and providing feedback to the AI agents or to the AI. So, and I'm super excited for the testers to be elevated to that, level.
Yeah,
And I mean, developers are going to go through a similar transition,
right.
to some extent. So I'm very curious to see how it's going to pan out.
Yeah. And if, for example, you're in the industry now and you maybe haven't touched AI tools much, or maybe you've touched them a little bit, what kind of skills do you think like people need now to kind of stay relevant in the industry, keep up with the times? Like, what advice would you give to someone, or maybe someone who's just joining the industry, right? Who's like a grad, um, or someone who's been in the industry 20 years and maybe is set in their ways and they've not really like learnt new technology. What advice would you give those people?
Yeah, I'll tell you three things that I recommend people to do right now if you haven't got your hands on AI yet. I would recommend you to understand how AI works, first of all. I know that we don't exactly need that to use AI, but it's very helpful to understand how these algorithms work
Mm,
so we don't make mistakes in using AI.
right.
Number two, I would get a hands-on experience with the AI tools like writing code with AI or using the AI test automation tools. There are a lot of free trials. There is a lot of tools you can try out for your testing purposes. Um, and also, of course, use it for your own personal purposes. I use AI for anything, starting with the research on, my health,
Right.
to, how my kids are studying and like what are the tasks I can give them to study, to do a homework in school.
Nice.
So start actively using it so you can get a better understanding how to use it. Um, and then number three is, of course, start using it in a day-to-day work after you understand what the tools are. And I would say attend the conferences, listen to podcasts like this
Mm.
one to understand what other people are doing. Because we're in a time when everything changes so fast that, in 2 months, there is a huge changes that are happening and that you can just fall out of the loop. So you have to stay up to date with what's happening and learn from others on how they're using AI. So if someone said like, "Hey, I'm using it for log analysis," and you're like, "Oh, I didn't think about it, so let me try that too." So learn from others, learn the basics of how AI works, and learn about the tools and start using those tools on the market.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think learning some fundamentals is really important because I think if we think it's magic and we don't understand how these algorithms work, then
Yeah,
we don't know how to use prompting, and you're more prone to like hallucination and things like that, right? Because you don't really consider what's in the training data set or what isn't, and I think that's really important.
yeah,
And even doing like a fine tuning exercise, right? Like I done some Udacity courses on like learning AI just to get familiar with like fine tuning a BERT model, for example, and just to see how the process is, what it involves. But the other thing I think is really important though is just trying something, right? Because I think that log exercise you said, maybe just get some logs and also looking for problems in the org is like if triage time is a big issue, say you're in a big QA org and you're noticing the organization is spending a lot of time doing bug triage, then maybe there's something you can do there to kind of help, right?
exactly, exactly. Look around for problems, right? This is
Yeah.
always a good advice. Like, don't try to stick AI everywhere, but
Right.
think
Right.
about like the right problems that can be solved with AI, right?
Yes.
That's
Absolutely. Yeah.
another good reason to understand how it works so you know how to apply it.
Yes, definitely. And also, like, I think sometimes people think you can just apply AI to everything. And I think that's also not useful, right? It's knowing when you can use it and when you can't use it. And maybe what are some actual limitations of using AI? So, given we are talking with models, right? These aren't things that can do critical thinking at the moment. We haven't got AGI yet, right? So, what are some limitations of using AI and how should we be careful, right? You mentioned human in the loop. Like, why is that important?
Um, So AI always needs the right context, and most of the time it doesn't have the full context, and it could give you the information, the outcome that is not exactly relevant. That's where the
Right.
human comes in. We always have to bring the full kind of context into the picture. Like for example, if the car is driving and there are these places on the road, like I don't know if you've seen them, that are not very standard, and so their self-driving car, they can easily, like I saw a self-driving car on the train tracks,
Wow.
the other day. It was just standing there and couldn't get out, right? Because it doesn't know about some of these unique situations, the context
Mm.
that we have. We would be like, oh, you never do that. But we know
Right.
that, and it doesn't have that context. So this is why the human should always be in the loop. Um, so the other thing, AI can get also uncontrollable. Like think about like AI can create millions of tests for us, but does it make sense? No, it doesn't, because then it becomes not maintainable. So we still have to bring the strategy. Okay, how do we create the right types of tests and a amount of tests that is reasonable for us to run and maintain, that is practical, right? So some of this context, again, AI doesn't understand what is practical in a scale of organization or in a scale of the team that we are in. um, of course, there are some challenges with the industries that are very regulated, and compliance in healthcare and finance. They have to kind of make sure that they're very careful with the kind of AI that they're using. and approving. And when, for example, in finance industry, you deal with someone else's money. So if you use AI, and it makes a mistake, you're going to be
Yeah.
in a big, big trouble. So whenever it comes to the customer, experience, I'll tell you a funny story. Some time back, I was booking a hotel um, for my contract. It was not. It was a company meeting or something like that, and I could tell the AI was on the call. Okay, and it booked me a room. When I tried to book that room on the website, it did not work. But when I called in and there was some AI thing on the call, and it said, "Yep, I'm booking you the room." So what do you think? I come there at 5 a.m. in the morning. My flight was overnight flight. I come at 5 a.m. in the morning and they say, "No, we don't have this reservation." I'm like,
Oh
"What do
no.
you mean you don't have that reservation?" They were like, "Yeah, it's there, but it's marked canceled." But I'm like, "I never got any cancellation." The I think on the call told me that it booked the room for me,
Oh
and you guys
dear.
don't, like, it's canceled. So anyway, it was really interesting experience, right? So, and there were multiple stories, if you remember, a couple years ago when companies started using it, that kind of got blown up like that. So, still need human in the loop, to make sure that we still don't hurt our business and customers.
Yeah. And even for coding, I think, right? It's almost like you shouldn't use AI to code something you wouldn't feel comfortable coding yourself.
True,
To some degree, because
true.
I feel like you can use it as like a multiplier or a tool to speed things up. But if you don't know what good looks like or what the output should look like, you could end up with a lot of AI code that A could be hard to maintain, B may not be really idiomatic, security issues, and maybe C just AI slop, right? So yeah,
I
I
agree with that, but I've also seen companies doing having different agents responsible for writing the code and
yeah,
reviewing the code, and I think that's where the future is going to be too. You know, there will be agents,
yeah,
checking each other work in a way, right? So we'll still need
right.
human, but there will be different roles played by agents.
Yes, I can see that. I can definitely see one agent reviewing the code of another agent, and you can just iterate until something's working. Whether it's maintainable for a human, though, that's where you still need the human in the loop,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
But maybe
yeah.
it doesn't need to be because there'll be another agent that just maintains it, right? So,
Let's see what happens. Like, do we even need engineers in the future, right?
well, I think we do. I think engineers still have a role in terms of deciding what gets built and how it gets built. So, when I've seen a lot of heavy AI usage where someone doesn't care about the syntax writing so much, it's more a case of describing what the architecture looks like, what the data models look like, and using their experience in that way to create markdown files to then guide the AI in terms of following the best practice or following like patterns they've seen
Mhm.
work. But actually, maybe the code patterns we have, I'm just thinking now, maybe are only relevant really for some humans, right? Because there maybe I was sort of having a discussion with someone today about the page object model, which is heavily used within like Playwright and UI testing. And at some point in time, these models, when we had certain tools like Selenium and we were developing websites many years ago, they were quite relevant that you would use these abstractions
Yep.
to hide locators and things like that. But now with modern sort of like React and, with modern tooling like Playwright, it's a lot easier to get a test working without having to put data test IDs everywhere and to use maybe the page object model, right? You don't necessarily need to do those things. So it got me thinking like, what other patterns have we kind of taken for granted as like, there's loads of software design patterns that people have documented, like the Gang of Four and others which they've come up with. But maybe this is only relevant if humans are writing the code, right? To some degree. But as tools keep developing, as frameworks keep changing, maybe some of this old trivia that we have needs to be revisited if it's still
Yeah.
relevant.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's very much possible. And AI can even come up with their own best practices and
right.
engineering excellence thing, right? That is going to teach us. Like, you just wait. So yeah, true.
Yeah.
It's all evolving.
It's evolving so quickly and it's evolving so much so that technical books really are also considering whether they want to write about AI because it's changing so often. So actually, reading books these days can also be a bit biased because authors don't really want to date their book within like 2 months of it being published,
Yep.
which also means um, yeah, it kind of means that maybe books aren't always relevant for learning a lot about modern tooling and approaches. It may cover like the core concepts of a particular framework or technology, but it won't necessarily talk about how you could use that with AI, right? And that's why,
Yep.
like you mentioned, other resources are much more important, right? Those communities that you mentioned. Um,
Exactly. This is why, learning from each other and learning from the podcasts, or talking to someone, is so more relevant in the times of transition like this, that the books are kind of like getting outdated so quickly that
yeah.
it doesn't always make sense to write them. But I still admire, like, I've seen some books from authors on AI, and I still admire them that they can write it so quickly that whoever reads it, they can still use it for their learning and advantage. Right? But being out there and just learning from as things are developing is so much more important in these days.
Yes, absolutely. And it does get me thinking a little bit about some of these computer science programs. Like, um, I was looking at one of the syllabuses of like what's in a computer science program these days, and some of them have a lot of AI in them, some of them don't, and it just gets me thinking like maybe you still need some of that foundational knowledge that is still there, which is still useful. But the question is, like, when people start working in industry where there's a lot of change happening, are we preparing people with the amount of change that people have to go through? Because I can imagine some graduates leaving uni going, right, it's now I'm ready to start my new job and I've done the hard work. But I think that, like you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the hard work never stops. In tech, there's always continuous learning, and I think it just becomes part of being an engineer or someone in tech, right?
Yeah, yeah. The education is going to change, right? It will have to transform, starting with the kids' education in school and the college education. It will all have to change, right? Because so many things we can now learn from AI. Like even healthcare advice. Like I get a better advice from AI. I know that they're going to stop giving the medical advice, but I can learn so much more that I can bring to my doctor and say, like, okay, look, this is what I already
Mm,
know, that they might not even, know to some extent, because AI is all educating on the latest, information, and they've been studying 20 years ago and they don't go to conferences. So the education is becoming so much more accessible with AI that I don't know if we need a 4 year, like bachelor education anymore, or what is it worth? Like, what's the 4 year bachelor education now worth if I can do so much with AI? What do I actually need to know? Like, I think the skills will change that are required to do these
mm,
jobs. And then the education will have to change in adapting to, okay, this is the skills that we are teaching.
mm,
To be honest, I always felt like our education doesn't exactly prepare us for success in the
right,
industry. Sure, it gives us, I think the best thing that my education gave me is the ability to learn and
right.
understand the new things that are coming. Like, I can understand the architecture now quickly because I learned to deal with the complex structures or
Mm,
complex equations or whatnot. But you come in there and how smart you are doesn't matter anymore. You actually have to figure out how to influence people around you, how to do
mm,
the right thing, how to prioritize, how to manage, and whatnot. So I felt like there was already a gap between our
yeah.
education, computer science education, and the industry. But this gap will only grow more because of how AI is changing our learning processes.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess the one thing I've learned from, doing these sort of formal programs is really like being able to do some critical thinking, like just to question a little bit where information comes from. And it's something that people don't always do, right? They get information and that you don't always question who created the data. Do they have a motive for that particular data to be presented, right? And it's good to sort of, I think we can call it critical thinking, right? In terms of like,
Yes.
and nowadays with AI, that critical thinking needs to be there even more. And just coming a little bit back to your medical data going into LLM models, right? The one thing that concerns me is the people that run these models, right, do harvest a lot of this data. And my concern is, where does that data go and end up?
Yeah. And so this is why you cannot blindly take the answers, right? You cannot trust it blindly.
Right.
So in my experience, I take multiple sources into the account, right? Like I go to Facebook groups and I learn, okay, what people are saying, what doctors are saying
Mm.
there. I go to my doctor, I see what the doctor is saying. And then I
Yeah.
look at the, chat GPT and I see what the chat GPT is saying, right? And then I kind of put all of this together and I'm like, oh, okay, I think this is right, this is not right, or whatnot,
Mm.
right? So you cannot blindly trust it.
No.
But also depends on how complex and how rare or unique your situation is. Some situations are very straightforward that
Sure.
I almost like don't have to consult a doctor. I can get my answer here. Like my friend was telling me, oh, I think I have a mold in the house. I was like, are you sure? And then she was like, oh, I had a conversation with ChatGPT about it and we went back and forth and I told it all of the information. And it told me that, no, I don't think you have a mold in the house. And it made sense. Like to me, based on what she told me, it didn't seem like her symptoms were connected to the mold in the house. And that's what she ended up talking to ChatGPT about. It didn't
Right.
only convince her that she doesn't have it, right?
Yeah.
But it also gave her a lot of information about her
Right.
symptoms and the mold and if they could be connected or not, right? And it's amazing that she could come to this conclusion within like a couple of days time frame after talking to me and ChatGPT, right? Because I'll tell you, like some people, they spend months and years figuring out if, they have symptoms related to the mold or whatnot.
Yeah. It's a really good point. It's really good at summarizing data and giving you like potential options. And then if you've got other data to like corroborate and calibrate with that, then it's like, oh, well, it's very likely to be this, right? And yeah, I think it's a really good tool for doing that. Like, especially like when I Google things, now you've got it integrated in Google, right? You get the AI summaries, which are really useful. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you have to
Mm-hmm.
consider all data sources, but like it's nice to see like it can just give you a nice layout and summary of potential options. Which
Yeah.
in the past that would have been a few extra Googles that you would have had to do in order to get that information, right?
Yeah. 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 I use that all the time. Um, I mean, I'm kind of, I guess, concerned a little bit. Again, like you, I think we have all of this knowledge and we can apply the critical thinking to see if that Google answer is right or not.
Right,
But for
right,
people who don't have that experience, right? Like, I don't know, an 8-year-old comes and asks something, right?
yeah,
And they don't have the context and the experience, right? And they can just trust it blindly. They don't know how
yeah.
much to trust it, right? So I don't know how that's gonna go, right? But for us with
Mm.
the experience, it kind of very helpful, right? To have like a second set of eyes, basically.
Yes, that's a really good point. I think if anything, people need to learn how to really like question and use critical thinking from when using AI, because it's we're gonna end up at a place where every model is gonna be trained on us personally, and it's gonna give us the data we want to see,
Mm-hmm.
and we
Mm-hmm.
have to be brave enough and have enough information to question that and go, no, this doesn't feel right. And it's hard to do that when it's almost like a Claude code review sometimes, right? It will say you can approve this pull request because of all these things, and it gives you like a tick, maybe like the AI's approved the code review. But then you suddenly notice there's something odd in the code, or maybe you know that you're right. The test cases that have been added are a certain type of test where you're only testing positive scenarios and there's no negative scenarios added.
Yeah.
And it's like the AI said, "Yep, you've extended the test coverage of your AI of the repo.
Yeah.
Congrats. You can,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. So on that topic, when I was talking to some developers from Amazon, they're telling me that they don't use AI to write unit tests, even though it's such a obvious, like such an easy thing to do, just to tell AI to write unit tests for your code,
yeah,
right? But they're saying that if AI wrote that code, then it's going to be biased towards what it wrote. It would write the
yeah,
test that it already thinking
Yeah.
that, this is what the code is for. So I'm going to write the test what the code is
Yeah.
for, right? And so that's where the critical thinking. And so, so those folks were telling me that they use specifications and the user behavior documents to
Mm.
write the tests and the unit tests, rather than just tell AI to write the test for the code that it wrote, because it will be biased.
Yeah, that's a really good example, actually. Another one is like if you're testing an API, like to check the contract is correct, you want to go back to the Open API specification or something, right? You don't, because otherwise you just be like, "Yep, this JSON looks good," but
Yep.
is it actually what the what the receiver or the consumer of that API is expecting? So it's
Yep.
kind of like using a different source of truth to kind of
Yes.
verify it's correct, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because you could say, look at this implementation of this integration with these two APIs, take those out and put them into test cases, but actually the contract there may be invalid, and they've just invalid on both ends. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
definitely
Yep.
putting out other specs or other documentation to, and actually it may just show the documentation is invalid, and you may go, oh, okay, I need to update the docs, right?
Yep. Yep. That's where the human in loop comes in the picture. Yep.
Yeah, so we still have a role. That's what I'm learning about in
Yep.
terms
Yep.
of just the role is changing, right? In terms of the tools we're using and how we're focusing our time and energy in testing. It's not just being the person that just writes the test cases, it's being a multiplier and
Yes.
scaler of quality
Yes.
within an org.
Yeah.
So,
And see, this is what I would want the audience to be solving for, right? Like they should be solving, okay, how do I use AI? Because I know that it helps me and it saves time for me, but how do I use it wisely, and how do I can use it to make my life easier, rather than to think, should I use AI or not to use the AI,
right.
right? Like we should be solving next stage question. Okay, how
Yes.
do we use it in a way that it still saves us time, but still gives us great results?
Yes, absolutely. I think originally there was a bit of I've definitely noticed this in the industry, right? There are some people who are fearful of AI and are deliberately, I'd say, resisting a little bit because they feel like it's going to affect their role or affect their job. And then I've seen other people who've just fully embraced it, right? And have done for the last couple of years. And they've really like tweaked it as much as possible to get most out of it. And I think one person said to me, it's if you want AI to fail, you will make it fail because you just won't
Yep.
necessarily write the right prompts or get the right data. So you will show, oh, it didn't work. Look. And because you've got a motive of it not wanting to work, right? But if you do want it to work, you will investigate, you will learn, you will grow, and you will find what it's good at and then use it just for that purpose, right? And
Exactly. This is such an important point, the mindset that you need to have when you approach AI. And so I even posted about it earlier, to say that when you give AI to a tester, it's going to find a way for it to fail because it's a tester.
yeah.
So as a tester, you have to change your mindset. You should not be finding the bugs in AI. You should be focusing on how I can leverage it to accomplish the goals that I have in a more effective manner. And that mindset is so important. And back to your comment, there's always early adopters and there's always late adopters. There is
Yeah.
no, that's always the rule. The
Right.
10% is the early adopters, then there
yeah.
is the mainstream, and then there are late adopters. So there will always be people at different stages of, adoption. So that's not a new, that's not a surprise. So it doesn't mean that it's not working. It just means that they are, in a
Yeah.
different group of adoption stages.
Yes, they're not at the front of the chasm. It's more they've been forced to use it with a stick,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they will be using it.
yeah.
Cool. Tatyana, thank you so much for coming on Tech and Test. Like, I've really appreciated like your insights and your comments on scaling QA, right, within big tech orgs and shifting left and QA communities and how we can like learn and grow. And I actually recommend if someone hasn't gone to their local like testing community, they should. Like here in Cambridge in the UK, we have one. which is good. People do share their experiences and do talks and things like that. But obviously, that doesn't scale. Right? Not everyone can come to Cambridge, so things like podcasts, like you mentioned, are good resources to like listen in and to find people like you who talk about testing and AI and grow these communities. And yeah, also the impact of AI, right, within the testing organizations, like it's definitely here. So I think we all have to be on board. And I think, like you said, reframing the question, the case of like, what problems am I trying to solve with AI, or how can I solve with AI today, right? And I think simple things like logging, looking at defects, even creating defects, right? Just a whole bunch of things that it could be used for, and is already being used. And it's a case of just opening your mindset and changing your mindset. So I've enjoyed the conversation. Like it's cemented some of my own ideas. So I've really appreciated that.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter, for giving me this platform to share my thoughts. And yes, definitely, please attend the events wherever you are in the world. Find the community near you. If you're in US or even if you're in Europe, come to Innovate QA events as well. But find the community near you where you can learn. It doesn't matter what it is. Just as long as you're part of the community of testers, I think you will benefit a lot from it.
Awesome. And if people, and the final note, if people want to find you or find out more about anything you do, like your podcast, where should they go?
They can definitely find me on LinkedIn and connect with me. We have a page called Innovate QA Events that where you can find information about Innovate QA events. And there's also a podcast that I usually post about it. I cannot. I'll share the link with you if you want to share
Sure.
it with your community. The Agentic Quality podcast, where we talk about adoption of AI in quality.
Nice. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter.